Lisa, it's absolutely lovely to see you. You're looking radiant. What time of day is it for you at the moment?
Actually 7:35 in the evening,
In the
Melbourne.
evening, so way past the end of the day. In fact, it's probably wine o'clock for you, but thank you so much for joining me. Morning for me. So we're on two sides of the world, which is lovely. So Lisa, tell me, when we first met, you were beginning sort of the adventure of becoming a speaker, and you had a chain of successful tailoring stores. In fact, I think you had them in Melbourne, is that right? And also five of them, is
Yeah.
that right?
Yes,
So why would you give up a successful business, which is very specialist, and obviously there's a great skill in that, to become a speaker?
well, truth to be told, I'm not a tailor, so I can't even sew a button. My husband is a master tailor, and so I went into his business, and I was like the branding person and the expansion person, franchising, all of that sort of stuff, bringing in the contracts. So that was my part of the job. And yes, we were really successful with our work. However, for me, every time a customer came to me and wanted something altered, I started to get a little bit of anxiety because I was like, I can't sew even a hem. And so I said to myself, if I'm really being honest, I don't know if I can live the rest of my life just being nervous every time a customer comes up wanting the simplest tailoring, because I think it's so important to be able to be hands-on and to know, how the craft is done. And if I was to be really authentic with myself, I wasn't happy in that business. However, it's still running. And I still do the marketing and branding and sales development, but this is my baby.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. And also, I imagine that having done the work of the marketing, the branding, and I'm sure you're involved also in helping with the sales there, that is transferable, isn't it, into your speaking business?
Very much so. Team building, training, communication, all of that, very much so. But prior to even the tailoring business, I was running a food and beverage, like I had a bar in Flinders Lane in Melbourne. And then prior to that, I was the organizer for Miss India International Beauty Pageant, which were my events. And so I had 4,000 people coming to my shows at one time, at that time. So, really from the time I left home at the age of 16, I'd sort of gone straight into business because that was the only way to survive. And so now at my age, it's just been business after business, and I can't think of anything more that makes me happy. Yeah.
That's wonderful. That the business acumen, that business experience is so important for speakers. I really love that. So how did you choose your topic?
Well, I have a very unique story, and one that's, it's like a cat with 9 lives. It's not just one thing that happens. It's one thing, another thing, another thing, another thing. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And it's quite daunting for the audience to hear, right? And they kind of just listen to my story and they go, is this really, could this really happen to one human being? But it makes sense because I'm also in the mental health space. And I think that when, people leave home at a young age, or they're not taught healthy boundaries at a young age, it makes them adults who become fragile, and so I really understood that. And so, but I also understood business. And so I felt that there was this edge, within me, because it wasn't just a story of one tragic adversity after the other. It was also a story of how a human being can, build a business with zero startup and go into so many different industries and try to be the best that they can be in each industry. And so I look at my story as just being a happy story, not just one that is, having, adversity that it's tragic to hear.
That's it. I mean, the overcoming adversity as a topic has always been a really important one actually for businesses, and it's one that we were asked for a lot in our bureau. And when you're talking about it, people want somebody who's actually done it, who actually has been there, done it, and overcome the adversity and come out the other end a better person, which you've done. So that's wonderful. And the mental health topic, of course, is so important at the moment. With everything that we've gone through in the last couple of years, everybody is so much more aware of their own mental health. We're all going to have some kind of PTSD, I think, after this pandemic, if it ever ends, I thought, or when we learn to live with it. So the question that every speaker asks me, and so I've got to ask you this question: how do you start?
Well, when I first began, tell you a bit of a story. When I first decided to become keynote speaker, I had no idea. And I remember Googling you and getting in touch with the assistant and saying, Maria, I want to be a speaker. And you were like, does she even know what she's getting into? Right. And so it was just been a huge process of learning the industry, and it takes time to learn. And just the same when it comes to your speech, it takes time. It has to be trialed and tested. I'm always sort of revising my intro because every audience is different, and that's really important, to change it up all the time. But I always start by engaging the audience from the beginning and giving them something to think about, and sharing with them that the story that they're about to hear is intense, but there is support out there, and that if they stick with me through the journey, I promise that they will come out with tools and skills that they will hold on to. That's the most important thing, because it's about the audience. It's not about me and my healing process. You don't do your healing on stage. It has to be done prior to stage.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I am so glad you said that. I've seen many speakers who have gone through terrible adversity and recount and go back there and go back to that pain. You can't open those wounds. You can only talk about it when the scars have healed. I am so glad you said that. That's such an important lesson for people who have got a difficult story to tell. So thank you for that.
But you're welcome, but it doesn't mean that we can't be vulnerable. When I'm doing my keynote presentation, especially when I get to the story of the abduction, and how I survived the abduction and what happens after that, you really have to be in the moment, because the audience will be able to see your authenticity from a mile away. And so it's really important to be present. It's okay to be vulnerable. There's strength in vulnerability and being able to shed a tear with the audience. But you have to be able to have the skill to take them out of that zone, and leave them in a space where they are exhilarated.
Yeah, absolutely. What was your biggest challenge, would you say, in sort of transforming into a professional speaker?
My biggest challenge would have to be, I don't know. I think it's just learning on the job. I think probably the first keynote that I ever gave, I was told that it was the worst keynote they've ever heard, but that's because I didn't have the tools and skills to bring the audience back, right? And sort of left them in a particular state. And then another keynote presentation that I did, I was really great in my delivery, but I was probably so raw and had a lot of emotions in the way that I spoke that the story sounded unbelievable, because it is a story that seems unbelievable, but it's based on unbelievable strength. So I think the delivery and your tone and the way you communicate, that's really important, because, you have to watch how you compose yourself on stage. It's a fine line. And I think those were the challenges, but I've learned over time, because I've been speaking now for more than 7 years.
It's 7 years ago that we spoke first time. Yeah. Wow, that's blimey. It doesn't seem.
You have not aged a bit.
Oh, I have. Don't. As all anybody watching on the video knows, I tell them I put my Zoom filter to the maximum always, because it's instant Botox, Lisa. It's instant Botox. So I tell you what, that was very brave of you also to carry on when you get knocked back like that so badly. Somebody saying that's the worst keynote. That's a huge thing to take on board, but also it's a gift in a way because they've told you, so you know, okay, I need to change this. And so how did you practice? Did you go out and speak for free in order to practice, or did you practice in front of your family and friends? What did you do?
Initially, I spoke for free and put a lot of money and invested in my business, because like any industry, this is a business, you know, and there's so much that you have to invest. So if I wanted to, you know, open a shoe store, I'd have to invest in, the stock, and I'd have.
Yeah.
So I think with the speaking industry, I had to invest. I had to invest in my team. I had to invest in flights. I had to just take myself out there, because initially with a story so sensitive, it's, difficult for people to say, you know what, we're going to let our corporate audience listen to this, and so I had to really invest in myself and the team and go out there and show the speaker bureaus, you know what, look at what the audience is saying, right? Look at the standing ovations. Look at how much I've developed. Look at what, testimonials. Initially, when I started, I had no company, like no logos, no nothing. Now I've spoken for some of the top companies, and I feel so blessed because I recently won the Golden Gavel, and Tony Robbins, Deepak Chopra, Earl Nightingale, Liza Pavlakos. And that's such an honor, because the Golden Gavel is like so hard to attain, because it's, Toastmasters. And, to have that, it's been nothing short of a blessing. But I think that if you love what you do, it just shows,
Congratulations on that. Congratulations. And very good going out there and speaking, because the more you speak, the better you are. And the other point that you made there for people to pick up, which is so important, speaker bureaus do need you to have experience. They need you to have those testimonials. They need you to show them on video that you're good, to show them those standing ovations, to show them the brands you've spoken for. A bureau is not going to pick somebody up who's starting out. So you've experienced that, and now you're represented, which is fantastic. Okay, I want to go back a little bit deeper, a couple of questions to help our listeners. So with regards to, lessons before you become a keynote speaker, what might you suggest that people think about?
Depending on their story, really think about the ramifications it's going to have upon your family. Take mine, for an example. To tell a story like mine, it could affect my family in a way. They could feel shameful, embarrassed, but have the conversation with your family and make sure that they know that you're going to do the best, to not put anyone down, and just be as loving and empathetic and positive as you can be. So that's the first thing. Get your family on board, get the support as much as you can. Secondly, I think it's so important to do your research, and I think one of the best things I ever did was engaging you 7 years ago,
Thank you.
And speaking to you and just trying to find out and learn about the industry as best as I could, and then going off and trying to execute it. I invested in a business plan and had that professionally done, so I could really get inside the business. And then just, speaking from your heart, most importantly, you don't need to compare yourself with anyone. You don't have to try and be the best. You just have to be honest and take every feedback, good and bad, as positive feedback, because you learn. But I think, the most important message that I can tell anyone who wants to get into this industry is that it's one thing to become a speaker, but it's so important to be able to back yourself up financially and know that you're not going to get every gig. You're not going to get, you might not, get 70 gigs in the first year, or, even 4 gigs, but that's okay. Like, you need to have other businesses to be able to fund what you have to inject into this business, you know.
I love that. I love that. I've made a few notes. So get the family on board. That's so important. And, you know, it's not something that many speakers say, but you're so right. They need to support your lifestyle, support what you're doing and understand what you're doing. Love that. Do the research. Absolutely. And understanding, the more you understand about the industry and the business, so much easier. Professional business plan. Excellent. So many speakers don't. I often work with speakers and I say to them, you know, what's your plan for the year? What do you want to achieve? How are you going to achieve it? What does your business look like? And that's fascinating. It's brilliant. Don't compare yourself. No, be the best person you can be. So good. Feedback, a gift, an absolute gift. And the financial backup, in fact, two sides to that: financial backup and the financial investment you need to make to really be as good as you can. And every investment you make accelerates you, doesn't it? Rather than, accelerates you in your learning and in your development of your business. So I love all that. I love all that. So you've sort of teased us a little bit with some of your story, and people need to book you to hear the full story, but your story is raw, it is personal, and it can be difficult content for people to hear, because it is, as you say, it's like, wow, this is like something out of a movie. How do you deliver that content? What advice would you give when somebody has got that raw content to share? We talked about not opening wounds. How do you distance yourself emotionally from it?
I don't know whether you can actually distance yourself emotionally, but I think you need to, like for me, I will say, what's my end game? Is it for me to make X amount of money from this presentation, or is it for me to actually empower the audience, right? And through empowering the audience, you feel empowered, because you've taken something so horrific and turned it into something, changed the narrative of that to make it beautiful. So for me, it's just being prepared that yes, it's going to be a difficult story to tell, but there is an end game. This end game is, how many people in this audience can I inspire, motivate to change, to teach them that anything is possible. And so that's how I prepare myself. And yes, there are many moments in which once I finish the keynote, I need to cry. I need to, let it out, because, you've been so raw and vulnerable in front of thousands of people, right? But then what I do is I make sure I give myself the self-care. I debrief, with a psychologist, with my team, and make sure I've got the support. Thankfully, I've just started a new business during the pandemic called Positive Breakthroughs. It's a mental health practice, which we are expanding around the world as a subscription model. And thankfully, with that, I've got a whole team that I can connect with and speak to about debriefing, and we all understand it's a safe space. So I think going into the presentation, being prepared that it's going to be difficult, but there is a positive outcome. And then to end, make sure you debrief so that you are centered and back in a safe space.
It makes me think a bit like divers who go down really deep, and they have to sort of come back and they have to decompress before they sort of come back into the world. And it also reminds me of a speaker I've worked with before, Frank Dick, who used to coach the British Olympic team. And he would say that when he came home from work, he would actually sit in the car for 10 minutes to decompose, so that he didn't take his work in. And I imagine you probably have to do something similar to go back into the family, not to take those emotions. Tell me, do you also debrief with the client after an event?
Definitely, for feedback, just to make sure that they were happy, because at the end of the day, it's their agenda. I've got a keynote engagement coming up, and I make sure I have a conversation with them saying, okay, what do you really want to see out of this? What do you want your teams to take out of this? So a debrief at the beginning and at the end to make sure that you've delivered it. And if a client's not happy, I'm happy to do that keynote again another time. That's not a problem for me, because I stand for my work. And it's really important that the company gets, bang for their buck.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. One final question for you, because I'm curious, and I haven't asked you this before we came onto this. You're based in Australia, as we all discovered. You're down under. Is your business all in Australia, or are you now working internationally?
I've been working internationally for a while. And especially during the pandemic, I've done a lot of lives, online events, but I've been doing international work for a long time, and I've done a lot of press internationally as well. So I'd like to think I'm an international speaker. Yeah,
That's
most of my work
great.
everywhere.
That's great. That's really fantastic. Actually, I've got one more question for you. What's next?
What's next? Traveling with my children. I have 5 children, and being able to show them the world whilst I'm speaking, expanding positive breakthroughs, and just enjoying life, because life is short, and got to live your best life. And being a keynote speaker is something that I love so much. Um, people say, how do you do it with 5 kids? How do you do it? And I said, well, this is my hobby, actually. It's not my job. And when you love what you do, you don't care. You can stay up at 3 till 3 in the morning, speaking to London, speaking to wherever you have to make sure that you close that deal, you take that flight, and you empower that audience.
It's so important to love what you do. So I'm really glad you do. It's wonderful to hear what you've achieved in the last few years. Lovely to reconnect. I hope you've enjoyed yourself.
Thank you so much. Thanks for giving me this space and this opportunity, and see you soon.
You're very welcome. And thank you, everybody, for listening to the Speaking Business podcast. I hope you also enjoyed this episode. Please leave a rating on Apple Podcasts. If you did, tell your friends, share it. And until next time, I have been Maria Franzoni. Bye-bye for now.